Hi, Josh. Can you hear me? I'm
Uh,
just connected through my headphones. I'm not sure.
yeah, yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, I can hear you. Hey, Josh. Hey,
Hey, my
Philip.
man.
So it doesn't look like my headphone is working. I might try to disconnect it.
No problem.
Just a second.
Um, Josh and Bin, can you hear me right now?
I can hear you. Yeah, it looks like it's on your laptop mic or something, but I can hear you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, the headphone looks like it's I tested audio with Zoom settings, but it's still not coming through the headphones. So I'm not
Oh,
sure what's happening. So I've switched it out. Okay, let me share my screen. I think Louis said he won't be able to make it today, so it looks like we have everyone on the call already. Let me start sharing my screen. Thanks for adding to the agenda, Akash. Akash, did you want to go through this PR that's listed here before we go through the items, the queue?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Yeah, I was just saying that, yeah, if we could go through the top one, that's the one that Yi just created, just so
Yep.
we can get some traction on this one. Yeah,
Yep. So it sounds, yeah, go for it, Akash.
yeah, Yi, if you're there, if you want to give a quick overview.
Yes. I created this issue to ask for a vote for the new name, as we discussed in the PR that Akash created for the cosign design document. We feel that the current the certificate store we need a new name. So so in current scenarios, the proposal is that we need a store that this store will have a bigger scope than the current certificate store. So with this store, user can configure the public keys and the certificates directly in the related customer resource as an inline provider. This is what we support now. And with this store, user should be able to retrieving certificates if they want to manage the certificates in a key management system, such as either key vault or HashiCorp vault or others. And we also need to support that if user manage the key pairs, it means the private keys and the public keys key pairs in a key manager system. So similar, there are some different providers such as AKV and also HashiCorp. So this store will have a bigger scope than the current certificate store. So the name for the certificate store is not properly. So we may need to consider to have a new name for this store. And from previous discussion, I think Feynman mentioned some other sign authority, such as AWS Signer and other sign authority. That means user don't need to manage the keys and certificate directly. Instead, the sign authority will manage this key certificates for you. User just need to configure some identity information. So I also give a note here, for example, for AWS Signer as a sign authority. From verification point of view, users still need to configure a root state certificate. So currently for AWS Signer, they share the link in their official document that user can download it directly. And if user install the AWS Signer with the notation plugin directly, they also provided some other ways, for example, using a package, and that package also including a root state certificate. So currently, user can achieve this by configure a inline provider by adding this root state certificate, as well as configure notation. We have that notation verifier to set the correct trust identity there. So it can also support the scenario that the user wants to verify using AWS Signer. Of course, if user want to have a better experience, for example, they don't want to configure inline certificate, they want to, sorry, I saw a notification, let's dismiss it. If user want to retrieve the root state certificate directly from AWS Signer, then maybe the provider needed to add a new provider for accordingly, similar as Azure Key Vault. So with this scope and also the consideration for existing sign authority, I propose using the new name key manager system. So that means user can configure public keys, certificates from different source. So it is still user needed to do the configuration for keys and certificates, not that for sign authority, they don't need to configure any certificate. So I propose the new name is key manager system. So if you support this idea, you can comment with +1, or if you have other better options, you can also comment and everyone can comment and vote as well. Yes, that's the idea for this issue.
Sounds good. Thank you, Yi. In terms of deciding a timeline for when we want to make the final choice, should we leave it open for this week, and then by next week community meeting we'll have a decision on the name?
Sure. I think we can give 1 week. So yeah, feel free to comment on this issue. And also if you have a better idea, also we can discuss under this issue.
Sounds good.
Yeah. One more comment. Why I created the issue is that I think that PI is growing very long. So to make it very clear and openly discussed, so I created this issue. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you, E. So we'll leave it open and we'll set the target cutoff time to be next week this time. So we have some target date. Yeah, with remembering our discussion from last week, Feynman did mention that the name key management system may not be generic enough for some scenario. Feynman, could you remind us of the scenario?
I think that is a case that Ratify will not need to retrieve the key or certificate from the managed service like AWS Signer or Azure co-signing service. I'm not sure if you see my comment in the PR. So those services that unlike other key management service like AWS KMS, Azure Key Vault, Ratify can get the key, the public key or certificate from the manager service with just an ID, with a ID to retrieve the necessary certificate. So I'm not sure if this name, key management system name, is appropriate for that case.
I see. Yeah, it's good to clarify what we mean here. Like if we're going with key management system, what it means. Like, is this key management system, my interpretation is Ratify's system in managing its verification keys and certificate. It's ambiguous that when we say KMS, it could be like external services that's managing the keys for the customer. But Akash, what do you think what's your interpretation?
Yeah, no, I think you have a good point there too. I think the way to rectify that is key management system from like a Ratify perspective is like we're literally managing your keys, whether you provide them inline or not. But KMS is an overloaded term to mean also the upstream services. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm not opposed to that name. I think it's the best option we have so far, and I think Bin, you just suggested Crypto Store, which is also another nice option. If you want to comment on the PR on the issue with that option, but yeah, I think it's not perfect, but it's far better than what we had before in terms of key store and certificate store. So that's my front runner choice. But yeah, it's not exactly correct.
But when we say key management, we are referring to Ratify's management of your keys, right?
Yes. Yeah. In that frame, it makes sense.
Yeah. I think I'm also open to the name. But when we consider the name, we can also think about the scope. As Feynman just mentioned for the signing authority, it is true. But for example, for AWS signer, users still need to configure a certificate. That is the true to use for verification, and the identity, as Feynman mentioned, that should be under the notation trust policy, the notation verifier. So here, by listing all the scenarios that I see, user either configure key, public key, or certificates. So that's the reason I use the key management. Actually, the public key is also inside the certificate. But I agree that the system sounds like some not that good, and also the KMS is also overloaded a concept. That's true. Yeah.
Josh, do you have any feedback? Because we've been reviewing this scenario for a while, but maybe you have some fresh opinions.
Sure. For my perspective and other systems I've used, I think it would be okay to still call it a key management system, even if it kind of lays on top where the keys are really stored externally. You know, as long as there's some kind of way to identify, like I don't actually, I'm a referrer, you know, so if there's like internal, external, something marking it would be a good way to do that. But like other systems that I've used, like Ansible Tower and like HashiCorp's Cloud, they'll allow you, their certificate store will allow you to import, you know, and then basically just proxy through, and they hand off, like the key is stored somewhere else, but I have access to it, and here's the reference ID, etc. So it feels fairly natural to call it that. It feels better than certificate store, because it also has keys, not just blank certificates in there. So I personally don't have any issue with it. From a user perspective, it kind of makes sense. You know, uses similar nomenclature, and I'm kind of used to it being overloaded. So, you know, my next question is like, well, what exactly do you mean by KMS? And then I can go and look like, oh, you reference external, you sometimes store internal, and then that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, thanks for the feedback, Josh. So we'll comment on this and we'll reach an agreement so implementation can go on.
Yeah, sorry to rush along, but I'll be close to finishing the PR to introduce the CRD, and just if we can land on a name, then we can refactor accordingly. So
Yeah, cool. I think everyone is pretty much aligned on key management system as of now. We might just need to, I don't know, to communicate this to maybe Akash and Singhua, and then should be good.
Another option might be competing with the key management system. So in general, if we use the short name KMS, sometimes it might be ambiguous with the key management service that we usually use. So I'm thinking key management provider would be a better name. You know, we have it actually, if we say system, it always makes people feel that Ratify is a system to store those key and certificate, but actually we just connect with those key management service or inline provider to retrieve the certificate or public key to complete the verification process. So I'm thinking whether key management provider is a better name, but I'm also open to that. I can comment in this issue.
Yeah. Thank you, Feynman. Cool. We only have about 13 minutes that we have Ian Feynman, so let's go through the other two that we might need their feedback.
Thanks.
1258.
That looks familiar.
Scrolling to the status.
for this one, did we need to just do a PR review, or did we need any feedback from Ian Feynman? I think this was just code review, right, Susan?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Is there anything, Josh, you want to bring up, or we can follow up asynchronously?
The only thing would be if there's any comments that you'd like me to add around the standard air, standard out scenarios to make it a little bit, to add some guidance or clarity. Just let me know where you'd want those and kind of what you're expecting to have in there, and then I can update that. I've only got one change pending to push up, which is to remove some comments that you called out, Susan, and then it should be good to go. So if you can just let me know where you'd like those comments about standard or standard out, and I can get those added and pushed up, and then it should be all ready. And then happy to answer any questions if there's any outstanding questions on it.
Yeah. We can. I'll review this today, and then I'll follow up with you
Okay.
offline if I have any question.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you, Josh. 1264, support more trust store type. Just saying, what is the status for this one? Juncheng, are there any blockers on this PR?
Yeah, I have discussed with Bingbing about the CI, about end-to-end. So we are currently investigating to see if we can repro the issue we are facing when going through the third rotation.
Cool. So there's still a little bit of discussion going
Yeah.
on.
And if I'll let you know once the PR is ready.
Okay, thank you, Juncheng. The next one, we want to finish off the cosine discussion we started last week. So let me bring the PR up. 1346. Oh, would you like to share screen, Akash?
Sure. Yeah, I can share screen.
Okay, just made you the host.
Thanks. All right, can you see my screen? Okay. So I'm just gonna pick up kind of where we were last time. So we went through the discussion of adding the new key management system or equivalent named CRD. So I'm going to skip over that. And we did have some previous discussions about, at the CLI config, what the naming might look like. For the purpose of this conversation, I'm going to keep it high level, so I'm not going to talk about that. We can kind of follow up offline with the specifics of that. So we briefly started on this last time, but basically the gist of it is that we need to support multiple keys for cosign verification. And as the cosign CLI is written today, it actually doesn't support multiple keys per verification. So we have to kind of define our own behavior on how we're going to verify an image or a group of signatures that are attached to an image with multiple keys. And so you could have one key that you trust, and all of the signatures that you encounter will be using that one key. And so you verify against that one key. And then you need to determine if a single signature passing is enough, or you need all signatures passing. On the flip side, if you have multiple keys that you trust, do you want to see that, okay, at least one of those keys was used, and that led to at least one of the signatures verifying to true? Or do you want to just be stricter and say, okay, if I provide 3 keys, I want to make sure that I have 3 signatures and each one of them used a unique key to verify. And there's a few different scenarios where each of one of those is important. But based off of our conversation last time, we were talking about, well, is there a way where if you have multiple keys, you can kind of specify like a registry scope for that particular policy that you wanted to apply? So I could say that for any images under this repository, I want to make sure that my cosign verifications use key A and B, but for another repository, they're going to use C and D. And that also led to, okay, how do I specify specific keys within a key management provider resource? And all of that kind of led to the idea of maybe it's time that we introduced a concept of a trust policy for cosign as well. So this is just an initial proposal for that. Let me just scroll down. Sorry, one second. Sorry about that. So this proposal is to introduce the concept of a trust policy, with our goal state being we support kind of all of these different scenarios. For our initial effort and work, we're not going to be supporting all of these things, but I think it's worth for us to discuss this right now so that we can start introducing the concept of a trust policy for cosign. And then as customers ask for more features, there's more complex scenarios, we can additively add on new features for the trust policy versus introducing it later once we've already introduced this new standard for setting up multiple keys and things like that. So some of the top level things that we want to be able to do is that you have multiple of these key management system resources, either inline or AKV or any other provider in the future, and you want to be able to specify within a single policy scope which one of those resources or stores applies to that. And then you also want to be able to define multiple keys inside a single Azure Key Vault KMS, but then also have the ability to specify within that KMS which ones you want to apply to which policy. You also want to be able to supply a mix of keys plus certificates. So the cosign verifier does support verifying using keys and certificates. So in the future, we'll want to add this certificates functionality too. And you want to have a way to specify like your specific key or your specific certificate that's stored in your KMS object by a certificate name or a key name and the corresponding version as well. So that's how you get that most granular form of configuration. We talked about the scope. So at the registry or repository level, you want to be able to scope policies to that. You want to have different policies depending on the registry scope. And I'll describe what does that actually mean. So this kind of ties into you want to have different levels of enforcement. So, any and all that we discussed last time. And then this concept of skip, I'm borrowing also from the notation trust policy skip specification. You also want to have these extra things here, like TSA, so Trusted Timestamp Authority, certificate selection. You also want things like, do you want to use the transparency log for verification? Do you want to use the certificate transparency log for verification? And then finally, Susan, you mentioned this morning about the artifact type as well. So if you have nested verification, how can you filter by specific artifact types? So that's kind of our long tail goal, would be to support all of these different scenarios. And from those scenarios, like an example policy would look kind of like this. So this is your cosign verifier. So this is the verifier resource type. I got my unique name, verifier cosign. I'll specify the type as cosign. And under the parameters, which are now verifier specific, I've got my list of trust policies. So you could have multiple trust policies that can be configured per verifier. And so you just define it, give it a specific name. Some of this is going to look very similar to how Notation does their trust policy. You have your registry scopes, you have your artifact type scopes, and this is for a scenario where you may have an image that has an SBOM attached to it, and then the SBOM is signed with cosign, and you may have a requirement where if I've got an SBOM signed with cosign, it's coming from pipeline A, so pipeline A is using its own unique key. But if I've got, some other form of attestation, that's being generated by pipeline B, and that's using a different key. So for those two scenarios, you want to make sure that you can differentiate which trust policy with which keys applies to which artifact that's being signed. The more important part, which is what we're going to implement in the first phase, really, is keys. So you got to list which keys that you trust. And so each element in this keys array is going to be, so the required field is KMS. So KMS is going to correspond to the name of your key management system resource. So if I have an inline key KMS setup, I'll provide it the unique name. That's the metadata name for that resource. And then this just assumes that any sort of keys that I encounter within this KMS, I'm going to now load in and trust. Now, if I'm using a provider like AKV, where I can specify multiple keys, then I might want to be more granular in which keys I support. So I'll specify, okay, I want to only trust the key called Wabbit Networks IO, and it's this version, if you want to specify even at the version level. Same functionality will eventually be mirrored for certificates. Although in the first phase, we will not be supporting certificates, we will not be supporting artifact type scopes, and we will not be supporting registry scopes either. So really the only thing in this first phase of work is the name and the keys list here. Anything after that is going to be extra work depending on if there are customer scenarios that dictate that. So beyond certificates, there's also TSA certs, transparency log verification. You can specify a custom recore URL. So this is actually functionality that we already have today in the cosign verifier, but now it's scoped at the trust policy level itself. So you can kind of mix and match which recore URL you want to use depending on your trust policy. And then finally is our enforcement here. So any, all, or skip, and skip would mean here's an example of a skip enforcement where if we have some sort of special repository or image that we want to just do break glass on, don't verify anything, you can just skip the enforcement there. Enforcement is also another capability that we will not support in the first round of work. So again, the only things that we're going to actually implement if we go down the trust policy route are the list of keys, and then each of these keys will have the ability to specify your KMS, which is required, and then you can be more granular with the name of your key and your version of the key. So yeah, that's kind of high-level introduction. I know that was kind of fast, a lot of information, but this is the proposal I have for trust policy. So if definitely take a look at this if you haven't already. And I guess does anyone have any questions about this? Any suggestions?
Hello,
Yeah,
Go ahead, Yi.
Akash, I needed to drop, but I will take a look at this proposal. So this is this a PR or some document? How I can see it?
This is the same document. This is the same PR that
Okay.
I'm adding to.
Okay.
Yeah, I can send you the
Okay.
specific link to the section. I know it's a long document now, so.
Okay, thanks. I need to drop. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
you.
Bye.
I will also need
Thanks,
to
Yi.
drop. We'll continue to review this PR, and especially for trust policy section. Thank you, everyone.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Raymond.
Just one note from, I guess, my perspective. The trust policy makes a lot of sense because the way that I see this being adopted is there's going to be like developer first adoption where they're like, okay, I want to add this to my pipeline, and they're not going to care about all this stuff. They're just going to like, here's my key, and it just goes all the way through. And then there's going to be another set that comes in, which is going to be a platform team or an SRE team that is in charge of implementing this for every app in the environment. And they're going to need to have that level of control to say, okay, well, this key is for development group A, this key is for group B, this key is for prod, this key is for dev, and then be able to scope it on the repos and stuff like that. So like into the future, I definitely see that being very needed on that end once it scales out more and an organization was looking to adopt something like this.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think that's why the iterative approach probably is good here. I know like a lot of the stuff I'm mentioning here is like kind of going in the weeds, and really right now there's probably not customer need for it. But I think this is like their end goal that we'll have to eventually get to, because all this stuff is already supported. Well, the scoping is supported for some of the other admission controller projects. But there's also stuff like, transparency log verification and enforcement to a certain degree, which are supported by Cosign and the Cosign 6-stores policy controller too. So we want to eventually get to that point because there is a need for it. But the goal of introducing this now is if we can introduce this concept now and then just build on it, we're not kind of going in the future to refactor now saying, hey guys, like you got to now change your behavior, how you, configure Cosign, and now move to this trust policy concept. So I think it's worth introducing this now, and then we can add to it as we go.
I agree. It makes a lot of sense. So would the first iteration be for that former use case where, okay, well, now I have multiple keys, but I want to just like, here's all my keys, and if these check, then I get to go through the gate essentially. And then as time goes on in iterations, it would be like, okay, now I want to say this key only works here, but those are all future iterations to it. Am I getting
Yes, yeah,
that right? Okay.
you're getting close. Yeah, so the first iteration will be you can provide kind of a list of keys that you use, you trust, but that list of keys are trusted like a pool of keys. So if any one of those keys is used in a successful verification, then Cosign is going to say good to go. It's not going to be like, okay, if you provided 3, I gotta use all 3 against 3 unique signatures, because that's kind of where this enforcement part of it comes into. So you can think of as we will have a default under the hood enforcement of any, which is if you provide a list of keys, we're going to trust all of them equally, and we're going to just check to see that at least one of them was used in a successful signature verification.
Yeah, and that makes sense for most cases because then they might assign one thing with one key and another thing with another one.
Exactly.
And not need to have the granularity. Like, here are my keys. If one of them works, you're kind of walking up to a door, and if one of them works, you can get in because you had the keys in the first place. Makes sense.
Hey, sorry, I had to go answer the doorbell. What is the latest discussion?
No, we're just discussing the kind of what are we gonna do now versus what we do in the future, and how it's gonna look like.
Yeah.
What is the default like enforcement behavior that we're gonna do right now and not allow people to configure? So the default is gonna just be any. I think we
see.
discussed this 2 community meetings ago that maybe we just don't add this whole enforcement thing right now. We just say, hey, it's any right now, and that's kind of what we support, and then we can add to it.
Yeah. Is there already outlined somewhere what parameters we're going to support in the first iteration?
Yeah, so there's a little blurb here I can add to it, but yeah, we're only going to support keys with KMS name and version, and then the behavior will match the enforcement of any, but we won't provide any more support than that.
Yeah. Sounds good. And from an implementation detail perspective, Notary is handling all the filtering for us. Like we give the trust policy to Notary, but for cosign, we will have to implement the filtering ourselves.
Yes, exactly. So Binbin had a really great idea of what if we were able to unify the two, so use the same trust policy specification for notation. And that's why a lot of this looks very familiar to those familiar with the notation trust policy. But there's a lot of stuff that is actually different, which really won't work in our scenario. Things like identities is not really a thing equivalent here. Or if you have only keys, there's certain information that you can actually filter by, like, issuer and things like that. Also, some terms start to get overloaded. Like, what is I think there's a field called like signature verification policy or something like that. And that is different from how we would want our enforcement to look like, because I think at that level, it's looking at there's different stages in the notary verification process. Like, are you doing TSA? Are you doing claims check or something like that? There's like 5 different steps in the actual signature verification process. So I think that's what that policy configures to. And we could use the same names, but then we're kind of overloading the spec and using different functionality for the same spec. So I thought there was enough of a difference where we can use the maybe trust policy concept, but the actual implementation spec will be different for cosign. So if folks feel differently, I'm familiar with notation, but I'm not like I wasn't involved in the creation of that spec. So if you have opposing opinions, please let me know.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yes, that makes sense.
And I think, Susan, you're also saying that how will it work in terms of implementation? Yeah, we'll have to, right now we just kind of pass in the notary trust policy document directly to the SDK, the Notation Go SDK. And for this, we are basically going to be building our own trust policy implementation for cosign. So yeah, this will require good documentation because we've kind of just made this convention up for cosign, and we'll have to kind of teach through different user scenarios, like how would you configure the trust policy to achieve that specific goal. So under some of the user scenarios I have in the document, I have outlined a few scenarios. We went through this first one, which is if you have 2 self-managed keys, but you only care that at least one of them is used, how that would translate to your trust policy here. But a more interesting one is if you have, let's say, 2 signatures that are attached to your image, you got 2 keys, and both keys must be used because one of the keys was used to sign the image after it was built, and another was used to sign the image after it went through the test pipeline. So kind of like an attestation without the actual attestation content. So for something like that, that's where this whole enforcement concept comes in, because you can specify, here are my 2 different keys, and I want to make sure that all the keys are used via the all enforcement. So we may need to write documentation kind of like this, where if you have a scenario like this is kind of what it would translate to trust policy wise.
Yeah. And with the multi-keys, the enforcement here is to say all the keys must be used. I remember Akashi was saying like the signatures
Yep.
on the same image is like appears as different layers. And what's our gesture for enforcing all the signatures are valid?
Yes, so currently we don't have we don't have a story for that in place yet. We don't have support for that. I was thinking we could add like a new enforcement, like signature all or something like that. But yeah.
I see, yeah, just lots of scenarios to consider, but definitely makes sense to start with the iterative approach.
Yeah,
And,
that's
yeah,
and
and using the default cosine behavior as a reference.
yes, yeah, that's our guiding thing, because I hate if we build something and they're like, wait, I did cosine verify and it's not, it says it passes, but ratify says no. So yeah.
Yeah. Any other feedback on the experience walkthrough? And also just that this week, Josh, I might give you more context later, but internally we are having like higher other priorities that we might need to focus on, which means there will be less dev resources on Ratify over the next few weeks. So Akash, what's your plan to move forward? Are you planning to send a PR out for the CR and then?
Yeah, that was kind of my motivation for putting that naming thing on top, because that's kind of the last blocker for me in terms of sending that PR out. I'm working on the end-to-end test for that.
Yeah.
And then I think probably by end of this week, early next week, I have to switch. So
Yep.
Yep.
Anything else to cover for this work?
There's one more thing, but if there's something else people want to talk about, I think that's minor compared to the rest of this.
Oh, if it's related, go ahead. Like we're on this topic, so.
Yeah, so one thing that we wanted to get out of this was supporting the CLI scenario too. So kind of as a extra thing. One thing I realized is that we can do that, but for Azure Key Vault, we'll need to figure out a new story for auth, because right now it's workload identity dependent. So we need to write a new auth thing for that. So
have you looked at the AZ identity package?
I have not. No.
So there's a default credential in there that would allow you to piggyback off of like AZ CLI creds and then also environment variables. So that might be something to look into.
Okay, yeah, no, that's perfect. That's exactly what we want. I think users would just do AZ login and then just those credentials should work with Ratify.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then it's a chain credential, so it'll also look for environment variables, but then it will also work with managed identity as well.
Oh, awesome. So if you had like a Azure VM with like a user's system assignment, okay?
It should pick up the workload identity from the cluster as well. I haven't tested that, but in theory it should work because it's a type of managed identity.
Okay. Do you have any? Do you have a link or something, or I can Google it too? It's
yeah. It's the identity. Go away. Let's see here. This should be. I believe this is the correct package.
Okay, so I'm gonna just copy paste this because I think we lose the chat.
Yeah, the chat can also be found with the recordings. Just a note, Akash.
And I think I may or may not have wrote this article that goes along with it.
Oh, awesome. Okay, great. Yeah. If I have any questions, I'll just come directly to the source.
Yeah. And if I can't answer it, I'll point you to the SDK devs that help me write it. So
okay, cool. Yeah, so just closing on that, I think that was I didn't realize we had to do that work too, so we'll need to scope that too.
Yeah. Sounds that makes sense. The next investment we are making is to make the CLI into parity with the Kubernetes. So we will have cycles invested in there in the CLI
Awesome.
scenario. Okay, sure. Let me share screen again just to go through the remaining PRs.
Is that credential, what we're just talking about, is that, is the PR you're working on, Akash, dependent on that work, or would that be a later thing?
No, that would be later. I think it would have to come after my PR merges, but after that we could, I think it's fairly independent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I don't, yeah, so you have a little bit more context, but, and I don't mind sharing it, but I'll be on leave sometime in the next month or so. So my wife and I are expecting our third. But in that meantime, I might have some bandwidth, and that might be something I could look into once it's unlocked. I don't know when the PR will be merged, or something, when I get back. I'm not sure how long I'll take off for it, but yeah, that'd be a fun one.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Sounds good. Yeah, I think just depending on whenever this one lands, we can kind of create an issue to track that one separately too. So
Well, just keep me in mind, I guess. That's all I'm saying.
that's good.
I'll be around.
Cool. A quick walkthrough of our PR. So gone through the cosign document. Josh, I will give this one another round of review and we'll follow up with you. Juncheng is working on the trust store and we're hoping to wrap that one up soon. Binbin, you have one work in progress for the larger CRD.
Yes, actually, it was blocked by the above PR. So once that's merged, I can fix this PR.
Yes. So
Yeah.
Binbin and I so we realized I merged my status subproperty to the verifier and the store, but what I've missed is the unversioned. So we have beta and alpha, and I've made changes to the latest version. Is that right, Binbin? And we always have to make change the unversioned as well.
Yes, the on version always keeps the same as the latest version.
Oh, I see. Yeah. And the other thing I've missed is when I did build CRD, which generated the CRDs, but because I didn't make any new controllers, I didn't run make generate, which would generate warnings for like if you needed conversion between alphas and betas and things like that. Then Binbin took my change, and then he is working on the controller changes, so he got those warnings. So he added the missing methods and also added some logic for the unit test to generate the plugin locally. Previously, I was relying on the make targets, but if you didn't run them locally, those plugins would be missing. So I believe you switched it to building them locally. Is that correct, Binbin?
Yes, I use I just create some temporary files for unit test.
Yeah, sounds good. Quick question then, do you still need the plugin dir methods then? Oh, okay, I see you've removed it. Yeah, sounds good. I've approved it already. Would you like me to merge this?
Yeah, thank you.
So go on to that. Yeah, thanks for the fix again, Binbin. Next PR. 1290, I'm working on introducing the staging branch. So then all PRs would go into staging and then running the test matrix, the full text matrix before we merge through main. So I'm still working on the new workflows on my private fork. So I've created this PR just for tracking purpose. So we'll always have this. I don't know if I'll get this working before next week. But yes, I have this shelf right here. This is to introduce additional workflows, so reducing our matrix in the default build PR workflow. And then once the criteria to merge is met, like let's say the end-to-end basic test is passing, this PR will get merged to the staging branch. And I've added a new workflow that when there is a push to the staging branch, this job would create a PR to main that would also trigger the full matrix run as well as the AKS test. And this PR would be set to auto merge. So if the full suite have passed, this would be merged to main. So that would be like a two-phase check-in. And I was reviewing this process with Bimbi yesterday. He raised like, oh, what will happen if we had a failure in the staging to main process? The behavior would be like your PR would have merged to staging, but the staging to main PR would be in our PR list. So it'll be obvious to everyone that like there is a blocker for checking into main. And also we added a if condition to the build PR. So there is a target for just running the basic matrix. So just the latest version of Kubernetes and Gatekeeper. And we're also keeping the full matrix with the tag. I think there's an if tag somewhere. Save to test. So there is another workflow with the full matrix, but it's only triggered if you label your PR in a certain way, or you've manually dispatched the workflow from like the UI, I think. So we kept that option. So if you want to, you can still run the full matrix on your PR. So that's the overview of the changes. Any feedback on the process?
I'm sorry if I missed this, will the pipeline automatically merge to main after the test passes?
Yeah, good question. So I'm hoping this action here, enable auto merge. So the steps are here to create a pull request against the main branch and then set auto merge when the criteria that we've selected is passed. So that's a separate gesture that we will have to do on the branch protection rule to specify which matrix exactly have to pass. And then once those pass, this should be auto merged into main because auto merge is enabled, and the test PR workflow is responsible for running the test suite. So when there's a pull request on the main branch, it'll run through the whole matrix with the CLI, the end-to-end, and the AKS.
I see, got it.
Yeah.
Is there a mechanism for notification of some sort? Because we already run into test flakiness as an issue, but at least it flags it on our PR. If the tests fail, which would mean the action would fail to merge from staging to main, is there some sort of notification? And then how would we like rectify that? Would we have to go manually and rerun those specific tests and then the action would kick in again, or?
Yeah, so the main gesture we're thinking at the step one is because the automated PR would appear in the PR list, that we will see it listed and we'll see like a little cross, like merging to main is failing. So it won't merge.
Okay, got it, makes sense.
Yeah, so this is the proposed process, and of course I'm still testing it out. I'm hoping everything imagined is feasible, but I'll have an update once I get everything working.
Cool, thanks.
So we have one PR on the doc repo. Let me have a look on the status. Update trust. Okay. Okay, I see. This one is in draft mode. Yeah, just let us know when you need a review PR, Jun Chen.
Uh, so this one is about the document, and you can, I'll just publish it, and so you can comment on it. The only reason I keep it draft because the PR in the
Hasn't merged.
yeah
I see,
in the dev branch is still C. Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, we can start reviewing this, right? This is mostly ready, it's just pending the PR.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Also, you can
Well,
if you want me to have this one in the Ratify repo as well, I can do that
oh, I
in
see.
the discussion part. Yeah, please go ahead.
I think having the docs is fine. I don't know if we have a doc section anymore for the core registry. Not core registry, the core Ratify core. So I think for now the docs is fine.
Okay, cool.
Thank you, Jun Chang. And Josh, you mentioned where the where we could comment on the plugin errors and plugin warnings. Another appropriate place would be in our plugin documentation. So I think we have some docs here about developing a plugin.
Do we have an existing doc for that?
I think there's one, is it under verifiers there?
there we
Or
go.
verifier? Oh, there you go. You found it.
Yeah, it's like it should be under references, but it's under quick start.
Okay.
So right here, we have some docs for like how to build the plugin, I believe.
Do you, in addition to that, would you want any inline comments with the code? Like in the maybe in the sample Go file?
Yeah, that'll be great.
That down.
So just having a look at the overview, execute plugin as a child process, overstand it in. Plugin will perform at work and return JSON overstand it out. I'm not sure if it makes sense just to add a section about logging.
If you scroll down, does it have an example? Well, it links to the sample Go, which would be where the comments would be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so wherever you feel it's appropriate,
Okay.
as long as we have some documentation and it's discoverable that, oh, what should I do if I want to log an error? What should I do if I want to log in a warning? That'll be
Okay.
like very, very helpful.
Okay. Can do.
Thank you, Josh.
No
We
problem.
have 2 more minutes. Anything else?
Nothing on my
All
end.
right. Yeah, thanks for joining, everyone. We have to discuss the meeting schedules for the next few weeks, but we'll post updates as we find out.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.
See you.
Thanks.
you.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you.